Dénes Csala is a researcher and thinker interested in exploring the language of data visualization. He talks and codes data viz as an independent consultant and teaches about modeling complex engineering systems, data science, and artificial intelligence at Lancaster University in the UK and Babis Bolyai University in Romania. He's the data visualization lead for the Economics Observatory in Bristol, UK, striving to strike a balanced blend of data and text for the best science communication. His data analysis and visualizations balance on the fine line between work and hobby. And while he loves to debug D3 code, his best motivator is a filled auditorium. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll hand it over to you.
So hello everyone, it is my pleasure to be here. I know that I'm the barrier between lunch and you having that access to that. So I'll try to keep it very casual. I just want to share a few of our experiences. We have a small team of academics and former journalists, data journalists more specifically, economists formerly working at some institutions with quite some weight, I would say, such as like Bank of England, and some actual professors and a whole bunch of students. And then we are trying to create a communications platform, if you really want to be blunt, and then we get this all the time. We can call it a blog, but we like to see it as something much more sort of like and I'm hoping to show you that there's a lot more work behind it than just a blog. So yeah, we're trying to create a way to communicate economics, and a lot of times difficult concepts in economics to a wide range of audience. And then it's called the Economics Observatory, and then it's based out of Bristol, University of Bristol. And then the way it works is we have, initially it was called the COVID-19 Economics Observatory. And then the UK government in the beginning of 2020 was thinking about what is the role of a university in a time of crisis. And they actually, well, they had no idea what is the role. So they invited a call for proposals, and then I think it boiled down to that of information, but not just providing access to information, but somehow pinning down the veracity of that information. And then that's when they set up the Economics Observatory, and the way it works is that we have experts located in some of the most prestigious universities across the UK, a lot of them in the US and across the world in general. And then we called them sort of like our editorial board, lead editorial board. And whenever there is a difficult topic, like let's say, how did COVID-19 affect employment? Or how did COVID-19 affect part-time work? Then we would go to, a lot of times, the best or the most decorated person in the world in this particular topic, and then we would ask them, could you please write us, we operate with sort of like the op-ed style, so could you please write us an 800-word article? And they say no. But then they might say, I can definitely not write 900 words, but I can maybe write 5 bullet points, and you guys are smart enough and you can figure out the rest. And then that's where we have also a core editorial team, and a lot of times we get the ideas from the lead editors and then we try to make it into an article. And then that was very nice and it was very dry, because we need charts, right? We need, for difficult concepts, and this is sort of like the expose that I'm trying to make, that you will need a blend of text and data. It's not enough to have good text, and even though it pays most of our salaries here, nobody really likes a Power BI dashboard. It's so just data, it's also not good. And then I think that's why we chose to have a blend. So that's when purposefully we started, we hired a data editor. Well, I say we, that was actually myself. But then we started working with a lot of students. We teach a course in data science at the University of Bristol, and then we had access to a large pool of students there. And then we started creating charts, and then some of these are still very butchered. But we do try our best blend between how to teach a student how to make a chart, and then how to have some of the charts really well done, trying to show the way. So that's sort of like how. Let's look at one of the recent ones. I think this is just published 2 days ago. How has global food security been improved by the Black Sea Grain Initiative? Right. So very topical area. And then you have the expert with all their links and all the research papers, writing whatever is interesting, and then you plug in a nice chart. I'll tell you later what do we use and why, and then you scroll through, and then there's a few other charts, and that's about it. And at the end, you say, okay, these are the guys who you should contact if you want to know more about this topic. So this was nice, and it was working well for about a year. And then we started expanding, and then we started holding classes, both on writing as well as data visualization. As I said, a lot of our two core editors, they have backgrounds at The Economist and Vox, so they do all the text editing, and then me and my team, we do the data editing. And then we started giving, we sort of like dipped our toe into trying to influence public policy. And at the time, around 2021, 2022, of course, we've seen this explosion of dashboards on sort of like piggybacking on the pandemic, and then I would say a lot of them didn't really do a good service to our field, but a few did so much that overall it was actually a net gain. So what that meant is that the holders of the data, such as the Office of the National Statistics in the UK, really became interested in statistics. And the European Council really became interested, or Eurostat really became interested in statistics. So we tried to pitch that, you know, it's fine if you publish an Excel file or an Excel sheet, or even better if you actually make it available across an API, even better if you have a public GitHub that is documented and has code in order to replicate that data and perhaps automatically update it every day. But you should make a chart as well, perhaps using that API. And then they really started liking the message. So yeah, we started holding conferences as well, and then we made a magazine. I'm going to show you a magazine as well. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the process, or what did we learn, or why was this useful. So I tried to break it down into three concepts. I think the core mission could be a little bit detached from COVID now, and then we try to evolve as a generic outlet for communicating a lot of times difficult economics concepts. I myself, I'm not an economist, so a lot of times I don't even have any idea what the text is about. I just write code, but I try my best. But we really try to do that in a way that is beautiful, scalable, and impactful. So let's try to unpack each of these. So there is a significant challenge attached to each of these dimensions. How can we make something beautiful or easy to read? And I use this in both senses of the word. Beautiful from the aesthetic perspective, so that the chart is nice, but also beautiful from the article perspective, so that it's really well constructed, it doesn't mislead, and it really says what it should in the most concise way possible, while still maintaining all the scientific credibility and authenticity. We publish one article per day, and then we collaborate across the globe with about 100 experts, and then we get about 1 million readers per year, but we only have 6 people as the core team. So can we make every article beautiful every day? No, of course not. But we try. And then we have, over time, we have developed several, of course, some of our colleagues bringing in their sort of newsroom experience, but we have developed several techniques which we think helps a lot, and then maybe it's worth sharing. So whenever we invite the author, we provide them a guide. A lot of times academics, they used to writing 30-page, I'm an academic myself as well, but used to writing 30-page articles, and then you send it to a reviewer, and then the reviewer says, that's really nice, it needs to be 6 pages. And then you sweat blood to cut it down to 6 pages, and now we tell them it needs to be 1 page. So it's a lot of effort. So how do you create that balance between the content and not being misleading? And then on top of that, we also have sort of visualization guidelines, and then I think almost everyone is in the room who sort of we try to show that, okay, this is the visualization guidelines that you should follow, but we still get an Excel chart with the default Excel colors. Hopefully it's not 3D, but sometimes it's 3D. Sometimes it's even a pie chart in 3D. So it really does need a whole lot of work to be able to publish it. So a goodish example would be that we get something like this. So it has some charts. First problem is that the first chart is actually a copy-paste. The user doesn't have the data. It's in a repository that it's not possible to access. So you trace it. That's the only way. And then sometimes you do get an attached Excel. And then we really try to hammer it into something that I've shown you before. So in order for this data and text blend to work, it's inevitable to have an editor. And for multiple reasons, we need to verify the sources. Even though these are decorated academics, a lot of times you need to really make sure that what they're saying is true. Then we found that there's just no way. We tried even like ChatGPT and trying to use all the AI tools available, trying to automate some of the editing process. You need to just, it's always quicker if you just sit down, write it on your own. Then, as I said, yeah, sometimes we don't get the data in the format that we want, or it's outdated. This is one of the other issues, that they send us data, but it's from 2 years ago. Then, well, if you publish an article, you should make your best effort to publish the most up-to-date data. And then, yeah, a lot of the authors just, they really want that pie chart. And then, even though we should be acting as sort of like the holders of the key of what should be good data visualization practice, they really want their pie chart. So this is a difficult decision. Sometimes we just tell them, no, we can't have this particular chart type. Obviously, I'm just singling out the poor pie chart. But a lot of times, the chart type that they're suggesting is not the best way to represent that particular data, and it might even be misleading from a visual perspective. So it's not necessarily deliberate disinformation, but it's maybe misinformation. And sometimes we don't publish the articles that we receive if the author is too stubborn. They don't know that. Oh, actually, they do now. But we do have a large backlog of articles which are sort of still in the pipeline. All right, but then still the same challenge, 6-people team, 1 article per day, 1 million views per year. How do we make this scalable or replicable? And again, we try to do a few tricks over time that we have built up, and then I think some of those work. But a lot of times, the editing part, the actual writing of the article and how the website operates, even though, yes, and I saw that there's an on-conference about Svelte. Yes, we would love to have a Svelte.js site that just does everything that you want and then has maps and jumps from one location area to the other and has some nice background music and even serves you coffee. But people know WordPress, so you need to shove down everything on the WordPress pipeline. So that's very difficult. So even though we're forced to using WordPress for the text parts, we need to integrate it with, well, most of our charts I wouldn't call, at a data visualization conference, I wouldn't call them interactive charts. But some of the charts have tooltips, let's say. So there's a few ways. And I wouldn't say that we ended up going with Vega Lite as the main charting tool. And it's not because it does have a native WordPress plugin, even though that does help. You could have an iframe, right? And sometimes when we do have like really complex maps or let's say a bubble chart that has a D3 force layout slapped onto it or something, then you go to the iframe and you really code it up from JavaScript. But then that comes with lots of problems, right? You need to scale it over different screens, over different users, so we tend to stay away from that. So actually, Vega Lite, with the nice online Vega editor, it's still not scalable enough. So we do it in Altair, in Python. Because once I've created a pie chart, or, well, I'm not going to create a pie chart, but once I've created a scatter plot, let's say, in one article that shows, let's say, the evolution of GDP per local area versus the average number of households, you will potentially reuse this in a different article. So we try to create different pipes between text and charts. And then we just sort of like cherry pick which chart would be appropriate for this particular article, on top of the author-suggested ones. So it needs to really go to Python. And then the end product is what we call a visual abstract, which is something like this. We have the charts, they kind of look okay, and they have a little summary. But in order to, oh, and actually this exists on GitHub as well. So if you go on GitHub, for every chart there's a GitHub. We really try to be sort of transparent, and then you can download in PSV, in PNG, SVG, JSON, whatever, for all the charts in 2 themes, and then at the very bottom of the page you will have this visual summary. But how do we actually reach there? Well, with a lot of Python code. And then I'm going to show you some code. I'm going to love showing you code. It's undocumented code, so it's even better because you will have no idea what I'm showing. You're just going to believe that it's really is what I'm saying. So in the beginning, we use GitHub for everything. And we actually, if you want to be really nitty-gritty about it, everything is running inside a Docker container so that a new student comes, they install Docker on their machine, they Docker compose up, and all of our nice editing environment is just there. So it's done for scalability. In the beginning, we have some sort of like custom libraries to make the charts light theme and dark theme and so on. And then every figure, in the beginning, we have to do some data transformations from wherever the source data is coming from, an Excel file, an API, a CSV file, and then we follow sort of like the tidy long-form data format, and every data is re-exported. So all the time we restore the data that is directly feeding the chart on GitHub. And then we create an Altair chart, and for example, it has a lot of components. It's not just the out-of-the-box Altair chart, but every label, the shaded area, everything has to be added manually. But then we have the chart eventually, and then this is a JSON configuration, and then it loads the CSV file that we have just created, the standardized data, directly from GitHub. So I can just take this and separately work on the style and separately work on the data set. So I have one student working on the style, another one working on the data set. And then in the end, you do this for all 4 charts that are in this article, and then we do some trickery. For example, we started using the ChatGPT API in order, well, I have to be clear here. I started using the ChatGPT API, and then, of course, the actual journalists hate it because I'm just going to summarize the articles. And, of course, it's doing a fair job, but it's not that good. And then this generates me this visual abstract in the end. So it also needs an engineer. And it needs an engineer because we need to fit into our current boxes. Every data set is unique, and even though we would really like to automate it, there's just no way. Every chart is too custom. Manually, somebody has to fiddle with it. And yeah, we could do it directly in the Vega editor, but then you always start from 0, and then you could have a repository of some JSON configurations that you somehow manage, but that's why we thought that just Python is easier to automate. And then sometimes when we create, let's say, a printed material, then these are still Vega charts. So the actual design work has to come on top of that. And they need to take it into Figma, and then this particular font type doesn't have kerning or something like that. So there's a lot more work that could be potentially automated. And the final challenge is we still have 1 article per day, we still have only 6 people, and then our publication actually did start to be followed by some of the UK's major policymakers. So how can we make this impactful? And then we say that we need to concentrate on reach and teach. So we publish a magazine. I have a few magazines I've brought as much as I could fit in my backpack. So I have like 6 magazines. I'm going to put a few on the counter, take as you wish. And then we started doing these courses. And then, as I said, we started decoupling between the text and the charts. But then what we really found is that the biggest bottleneck is the data. We waste a lot of work in actually checking the data that the authors send. Is this really the data that it should be? Is it latest? And it's not that easy to get, let's say, statistical data for various countries and compare them, because every statistical agency will have their own API. It's a lot of custom work. So we decided that this situation is so bad that we will do our own tool that clearly focuses on this API problem. We have a data hub. This is what I said, that some charts you just pick and they say for aid and international development, these are the relevant ones or something like that. So the problem that we see is that now, until you reach the chart stage from data, there's a lot of hoops that you have to go through, and a lot of these steps are custom steps There's a custom designer that has to look at it. There's a custom API that you have to sign up and get an API key. So it's really not scalable. What you really want is a drop-down which says, I want the UK's GDP, and then I want the US's GDP, and I want to compare the two. And then with AutoGPT, actually, there's a lot of interesting automation about that. But that's, again, it's not a scalable tool. And ideally, you want the URL to be the same. So we actually started doing that. And then I think there's an interesting difference to point out here, that we have a lot of data hubs, but the data is not up to date on the data hub. You don't know whether they really use the source that they claim. It's not automatic. There's all these, if you ever try to automate a large data access project, there's all these cross-origin request problems in the back, and then you have all these API keys. So we just want to be a tunnel, sort of like not an API tunnel, not an API provider. And then we actually started doing that, and let's see if I can do a test. This is really pre-release. We are releasing it in October, so you see the boilerplate text. But what I want to show is, like, let's say I want unemployment or inflation in Great Britain, and then I just click on generate, and then I will have a nice clean API. API economicsobservatory.com/gbr/inflation. It will be the same for the US and so on. And then I have the editor part, which creates this boilerplate Vega chart. Let's give it a title. And then that should do. And then I have the data, which was used to create the chart, the raw data in JSON. And then I have the code. This is the Vega code. And then I can just post this chart. If it works, might be a pop-up. And then it should appear here. Well, I said it's still very, very beta, so I'm not sure if it will actually show up. Oh, there you go. It showed up twice, or 3 times. So what we want to create is a hub, and then what I will finish with is that the last part is what we've discovered is that in order to do this text data blending correctly, you also need an architect, which has to be a little bit of a jack of all trades. Because our audience is very wide, and we also have to concentrate on conferences, a spoken word, and then also printed word. So it's not only a website. How do you differentiate for these audiences? And then the speaker before me said this much better, right? And then you always want the latest, but the traceable data. And then I think that's why you need the full data part and then the text part together to make the good story. And then I don't think this is new. I think that, already Helver Ryan, who was the chief economist of Google, said this in 2009, right? So that was like 14 years ago, that data is free and ubiquitous, but we do need to visualize it. And I also think that it's a lot of times at conferences like this is used as a catch-all phrase. I think it's not enough to visualize it. You also need to describe it properly. And that's a lot of effort. So yeah, I think that's about it. I think it's really hard to make something beautiful and scalable and impactful at the same time. And it does require a team with a wide range of skills. But I think there's also a lot of lessons that can be automated. And then I think we as, let's call ourselves data visualization engineers or data visualization designers, we typically come from 2 streams, right? So there are the designers who learned a little bit of code, and there's the coders who learned a little bit of how to put 2 colors together nicely. And then I think everything is nicely coming together. So I think it's a good time to talk about this now. And then it does have to be considered, I think, both streams, they have to merge together at some point. This was finding the perfect blend of text and data, and these were my experiences from the Economics Observatory. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a PhD student, and I'm wondering if you think what you're doing is scalable to other kind of topic areas as well, because I mean, there's obviously kind of a lot of potential for communicating academic research better, and it can be really inaccessible because it's just very long and dense PDF behind paywalls. I haven't really seen kind of a lot of sensible approaches to actually helping researchers make their work more accessible for the general public. So basically, do you think that there is sort of a world in which we can have a lot of your types of organizations that sort of do this kind of work for different topic areas?
That's a very good question, and I think it's extremely relevant. And I think some of the universities I'm not aware, unfortunately, in the UK, but I know in North America, for example, Northeastern or MIT, they have a dedicated data visualization person. Before sort of you send off the article, you can send it to him, and then he can make sure that whatever your charts that are very scientific are scalable for a larger audience. And then I think this is a nascent field, and you mentioned a few things there, so I'm going to break it into two. One of them is the paywall part. I would really prefer if all the research is open source, and I think the computer science community is really leading here. If you search and the physics community as well, if you search for a paper in physics or computer science, they typically have it on archive or some of the open repositories, and then if you really search let's say one of the main author's names, which was the postdoc or the PhD student who did that research, you will find that GitHub repository, and a lot of times you will find the code there. And I think that should be the way. We should share not just we are effectively sharing the product now in academia. We should share the work instead that leads to the product. And that's why we have all these problems of reproducibility and some of the large parts of the general public not being able to trust academia because you only see what's the end product. It's kind of like one social media post, but you should bring visibility to the pipeline that's behind it. I think that the skills that this requires, let's call this the data visualization engineer, but it's a bit more like a business analyst because it needs to, as you said, if you want to tool it to other sectors, then you need to have some domain knowledge in that. So I think this is a new field, and I think we should treat it as a new field, and we should start having courses in this field, not necessarily in the university level, but at least targeted longer form courses. And I think it's really needed. Unfortunately, yeah, my answer is no. I don't know of any particular way. There are some organizations, but I don't know of, let's say, a degree that does science communication at scale. University of Luxembourg, for example, they have a very nice degree, but I think it's just sort of like an exception rather than the norm.
Well, let's go ahead and take one question from our folks online who are joining virtually.
Okay, that's come from Dénes Csala. Can you talk about why you opted for Outlier for visualization? Because there are other similar visualization tools based on Python. Did you find that Outlier helped with scaling better than other visualization libraries in Python?
Excellent question, technical question, I love it. So we really wanted to use D3. We really wanted to go just deep water, throw the student. So a lot of times we use a cohort of students at the University of Bristol who are learning data science as our guinea pigs. And then we try to see, okay, if we posted this chart on the course syllabus, will the students understand what is it about? So that's a bit cheeky, but we really wanted to go JavaScript because then the possibilities are endless. However, still the entry barrier, together with observable and everything, still the entry barrier, we feel it's too large. And the best, so what the Interactive Data Lab at UW is doing is, I think that they have a good blend of how to make data visualization chewable from a component perspective. So the reason that in Vega, Altair we just use Altair because we automated it in Python, but it's effectively Vega, Vega Lite more specifically. You can really chew it down to components. What is a scale? What is a data type? What is a temporal data? And then what are visualization types? And then by teaching it bit by bit, I think they get it, and then easier. And then by the end of the course, we can do it in like a 2-day intensive course, but usually in the university we spread it out, of course, over 3 months, like a couple of hours a week. They really try to make a relatively complex visualization in Vega Lite, sometimes multiple charts together. So our experience is really good with Vega. Yes, it's still the core Vega. It's perhaps a lot less limited, but Vega Lite is still limited, especially with interactions and then how to integrate it in the rest of the browsers. But we see that that's a good trade-off. That's a good trade. We looked at other tools as well. We looked at eCharts, right? So most of the Chinese internet is run by eCharts if you look at visualizations. We looked at D3+, which is sort of like an MIT variation on D3, similar to Vega Lite to Vega. And then we do use D3+ as well for some of the more interaction-heavy visualizations, but I think Vega was a good blend. And Altair is just automation of Vega, mostly because of labels. We don't like legends, and I don't think anyone here likes legends. And then if you give me a data visualization tool that puts the text on the line, I will use that. But then, of course, there are a few now, but we really wanted to, at the time when we started, it was a bit more difficult, and then we really wanted to have complete control over the chart elements. And then it's open source as well. So that's why we wouldn't go with, let's say, Flourish or something like that.
Well, it's great, I think, to end the morning on a chewy, meaty technical question. We are wrapping up our time for this morning. Thank you again for the wonderful talk today. We greatly appreciate you being here.